quite taken up all the way to terror. And Mr. Pennyworth sighed and harumphed and did his best to explain. And it was gone, and it was gone 4 in the morning before they were done. Bod was tired at, Bod was tired at school the next day. The first class was history, a subject Bod mostly enjoyed, although he often had to resist the urge to say that it hadn't happened like that, not according to people who had been there anyway. But this morning, Bod was fighting to stay awake. He was doing all he could do to not fail the lesson, so he was not paying attention to much else going on around him. He was thinking about King Charles I. What's the they have a class of leaders about that?
No, they're going up.
Okay. He was thinking about King Charles I and his parents, of Mr. and Mrs. Owens, and of the other family, the one he could not remember when there was a knock on the door. The class of Mr. Kirby all looked to see who was there. It was year 7 who had been sent to borrow a textbook. It was a year 7 who had been sent to borrow a textbook. What does it mean to be a year 7?
In 7th grade.
Obviously 7th grade, 7th year of school, yeah. And they turned, and as they turned, Bod felt something stab in the back of his hand. He did not cry out, he just looked up. Nick Farthing grinned down at him, a sharpened pencil in his fist. "I'm not afraid of you," whispered Nick Farthing. Bod looked at the back of his hand. A small drop of blood welled up where the point of the pencil had punctured it. Mo Quilling passed Bod in the corridor that afternoon, her eyes so wide he could see the whites all around them. "You're weird," she said. "You don't have any friends." "I didn't come here for friends," said Bod truthfully. "I came here to learn." Mo's nose twitched. "Do you know how weird that is?" he asked. "Nobody comes to school to learn. I mean, you come because you have to."
Exactly.
Bod shrugged. "Yeah, we know.
Yeah, we know.
We're quite aware.
So do you.
That's not necessarily something to be proud of." Bod shrugged. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. "Whatever trick you did yesterday, you didn't scare me." "Okay," said Bod, and he walked on down the corridor. He wondered if he had made a mistake getting involved. He had made a misstep in judgment, that was for certain. Mo and Nick had begun to talk about him, probably the year 7s had as well. Other kids were looking at him, pointing him out to each other. He was becoming a presence rather than an absence, and that made him uncomfortable. Interesting sentence. What does that mean? Instead of not being noticed, which is what he wanted, everybody knows when he walks by, right? Mm-hmm. Silas had warned him to keep a low profile, told him to go to school partly faded, but everything was changing. He talked to his guardians that evening, told him the whole story. He was not expecting Silas's reaction. "I cannot believe," said Silas, "that you could have been so stupid. Everything I told you about remaining just this side of invisibility, and now you've become the talk of the school." "Well, what did you want me to do?" "Not this," said Silas. "It's not like the olden times. They can keep track of you, Bod. They can find you." Silas's unmoving exterior was like the hard crust of rock over molten lava. Bod knew how angry Silas was only because he knew Silas. He seemed to be fighting his anger, controlling it. Bod swallowed. "What should I do?" he said simply. "Don't go back," said Silas. "This school business was an experiment. Let it simply acknowledge that it was not a successful one." Bod said nothing. Then he said, It's not just the learning stuff, it's the other stuff. Do you know how nice it is to be in a room filled with people and for all of them to be breathing?" "It's not something in which I've ever taken pleasure," said Silas, "so you don't go back to school tomorrow." "I am not running away, not from Mo or Nick or school. I'd leave here first." "You will do as you are told, boy," said Silas, a knot of velvet anger in the darkness. "Or what?" said Bod, his cheeks burning. "What would you do to keep me here? Kill me?" And he turned on his heel and began to walk down the path that led to the gates and out of the graveyard. Silas began to call the boy back. Then he stopped and stood there in the night alone. At the best of times, his face was unreadable. Now his face was a book written in a language long forgotten, in an alphabet unimagined. Silas wrapped the shadows around him like a blanket and stared after the way the boy had gone and did not move to follow. This is an interesting thing. It says, Nick Farthing was in his bed asleep and dreaming of pirates on a sunny blue sea when it all went wrong. One moment he was the captain of his own pirate ship, a happy place, crewed by obedient 11-year-olds, except for the girls, who were all a year older than Nick, and who looked especially pretty in their pirate costumes. And the next he was alone on the deck, and a huge dark ship the size of an oil tanker, with ragged black sails and a skull for a figurehead, was crashing through the storm toward him. And then, in the way of dreams, he was standing on the black deck of the new ship, and someone was looking down at him. "You're not afraid of me?" said the man standing over him. Nick looked up. He was scared in his dream, scared of this dead-faced man in a pirate costume, his hand on the hilt of a cutlass.
Sword.
Question.
A cutlass is a
Oh,
sword.
the colors is a pirate.
Sword.
What's the hilt? What's the hilt of something? The top. Okay, so it would be, yeah. Do you think you're a pirate, Nick? Asked his captain. Captain, suddenly something about him seemed familiar to Nick. "You're that kid," he said, "Bob Owen." "I," said his captain, "am nobody. And you need to change. Turn over a new leaf. Reform. All that. Or things will get very bad for you." "Bad how?" "Bad in your head," said the pirate king, who was now only the boy from his class, and they were in the school hall, not the deck of a pirate ship, although the storm had not abated, and the floor of the hall pitched and rolled like a ship at sea. "This is a dream," Nick said. "Of course it's a dream," said the other boy. "I would have to be some kind of a monster to do this in real life." "What can you do to me in a dream?" asked Nick. He smiled. "I'm not afraid of you. You still got my pencil in the back of your hand." He pointed to the back of Bod's hand at the black mark, the graphite tone. "I was hoping it wouldn't have to be like this," said the other boy. He tipped his head on one side as if he was looking for someone. "They're hungry," he said. "What are?" asked Nick. "The things in the cellar or below decks. Depends upon whether this is a school or a ship, doesn't it?" Nick felt himself beginning to panic. "It isn't spiders, is it?" he said. "It might be," said the other boy. "You'll find out, won't you?" Nick shook his head. "No," he said. "Please, no." "Well," said the other boy, "it's all up to you, isn't it? Change your ways or visit the cellar." The noise got louder. A scuttling, sort of a scuffling noise. And while Nick Farthing had no idea what it was, he was utterly, completely certain that whatever it would turn out to be, would be the most scary, terrible thing he would ever encounter. He woke up screaming. So we had a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And God caused him to have a nightmare.
Yeah, it was a dream walkie. Talking about it earlier.
Okay? Bod heard the scream, a shout of terror, and felt the satisfaction of a job well done. He was standing on the pavement outside Nick Farthing's house, his face damp from the thick night mist. He was exhilarated and exhausted. He had felt barely in control of the dream walk, nice going, and he was all too aware that there was nothing else in the dream but Nick and himself, and that all Nick had been scared of was a noise. But Bod was satisfied. The other boy would hesitate before tormenting smaller folk. And now, Bod put his hands in his pocket and began to walk, not certain where he was going. He would leave the school, he thought, just as he had left the graveyard. He would go somewhere no one knew him, and he would sit in a library all day and read books and listen to people breathing. He wondered if there were still deserted islands in the world, like the one on which Robinson Crusoe had been shipwrecked. He would go and live on one of those. Bod did not look up. If he had, he would have seen a pair of watery blue eyes watching him intently from the bedroom window. He stepped into an alley, feeling more comfortable out of the light. "Are you running away then?" said a girl's voice. Bod said nothing. "That's the difference between the living and the dead, isn't it?" said the voice. It was Lisa Hempstock talking. Bod knew, although the witch girl was nowhere to be seen. The dead don't disappoint you. They've had their life, done what they've done. We done changed. The living, they always disappoint you, don't they? You meet a boy who's all brave and noble and he grows up to run away. "That's not fair," said Bod. And nobody Owens I knew wouldn't have run off from the grader that sang so much as a fare thee well to those who cared for him. "You'll break Mistress Owens' heart." Bod had not thought of that. He said, "I had a fight with Silas. So? He wants me to come back to the graveyard to stop school. He thinks it's too dangerous." "Why?"